Thank you all for joining us today as we explore a day in the life of a bilingual worker in Australia. The Polaron team would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and the community. We have partnered up with Enliven Victoria to deliver this webinar. I'd like to first start with the agenda. We'll firstly introduce our panelists and hear from NAATI and Polaron's founder before moving to our panel discussion and finishing off with a Q&A. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand. There is a live chat box where you can send through any questions or comments you have for the Q&A at the end of this webinar. First off, I would like to introduce Michael Nemarich. He's the Manager of National Operations at NAATI. Today, he will tell us briefly about NAATI's bilingual workers in Australia. Welcome, Michael. Next up, I would like to introduce Marama Kufi. He's a bicultural worker who has worked for Monash Health for a Community Development Officer and has been with Monash for more than 10 years. He's also NAATI accredited interpreter and translator for the Oromo language. Wonderful to have you, Marama. I would now like to introduce Enliven Victoria's very own Silva. Silva has over 15 years of experience working in the tertiary sector, health, research, and within community organisations. Silva is passionate about developing and fostering partnerships to promote public health. She also has extensive experience working with cow communities. Welcome, Silva. Can you actually tell us a bit about what you do as part of the Community Champion Network?
Thank you, Angelo. Thank you so much to you and the Polaron Language Service team for the opportunity to speak about the Core Communities Task Force Southeast Partnership. So just to give a little bit of an overview, the Core Communities Task Force Partnership was established in November 2020, and this was through funding from the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. Predominantly, it was established to assist in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was formed between the City of Greater Dandenong, City of Casey, with Cardinia Shire joining the partnership in 2021. Enliven Victoria had the backbone funding for the partnership, and we also worked in partnership together with funded local agencies, which employed bicultural workers, and community champions were also recruited by the partnership to receive monthly honorariums from the councils. So really the network model is based on three main pillars. So it is based on support. So what we do is through informal meetings, emails and phone conversations, we support the bicultural workers and community champions with the work that they do. We provide communication channels, including newsletters and emails. And we also provide training, both at the fortnightly meetings, as well as externally as well. So just to give a bit of a background on the partnership. So thank you. Thanks, Angelo.
No, wonderful, Silva. Thank you so much. And next up, I also would like to give a warm welcome to Eva Hussain, the founder and director of Polaron Language Services. Eva is a certified translator, interpreter, and a NAATI examiner. Now, Eva, can you tell us a bit more about Polaron and the life of a bilingual worker?
Thank you, Angela. And look, I should admit that one of my first jobs was a bilingual worker for Cancer Council of Victoria. And I've also done various things in the industry whenever organizations needed to speak to the Polish community. So this topic is very dear to my heart because I've done this work and I know how important it is. And I guess in the last 23 years of us working in this space, we've done lots of projects where bilingual educators, bilingual facilitators, bilingual workers, bicultural workers have been involved. It's, I'm just really excited to be able to talk today about that very topic. And I'm also very interested to hear from Michael, because NAATI has once upon a time had, when I was starting, a kind of category of language aid, and I know that NAATI's undergone some major changes. So I'll be very interested to hear from Michael about how bilingual workers can become, I don't know what the right word is, certified, or how it all works and connects with NAATI. Thanks, Angela.
Lovely. I'll take that as my cue to jump in. Thanks, Eva. Thanks, Angela, for the introduction earlier. So I am Michael Nemarich, Manager of National Operations here at NAATI. So we do still call our test Eva Community Language Aids. So I know there's probably a fair bit of different terminology and the like in this space. I'll give you NAATI's opinion of where we think it fits within the industry and terminology and roles. And I'm sure in the panel discussion, there'll be plenty of questions for me at the end. So this slide, so NAATI, for anyone that doesn't know, we're the National Standards and Certifying Authority for Translators and Interpreters. We're a not-for-profit company that is jointly owned by the federal and all the state governments of Australia, but we're under the Corporations Act, we're not a statutory authority. So we were formed in 1977, largely to support the post-World War II wave of migration, as we had a massive migration intake to build projects like the Snowy Hydro scheme and the like. NAATI was set up so that those workers that didn't speak English well weren't ripped off in the workplace, more or less. And we've continued in that vein for 45 years now. We test in over 65 languages, and our focus is really that the people that need them have the language support they need from professionals. For our definition, interpreter or bilingual speaker or community language aid, the community language aid is connected to an organisation. They are talking on behalf of the organisation, and they are speaking in primarily the LOTE. So explaining policies and procedures, it's two-way conversation. The subject matter critically is low risk. And I think that's going to be the point that I'll come to a lot. Bilingual workers absolutely have a place. You might think that us being NAATI, we would always push professional interpreters. That's not the case. Bilingual workers absolutely have a place. Cultural workers absolutely have a place. But professional interpreters are absolutely required when you're sort of seeking higher complexity language or seeking consent, and you need someone that's neutral. So for us, interpreter, as you see in the second half of this slide, is the conduit between two people in that conversation. More complex and higher risk situations. So you can switch to the next slide. Very much for us, the boundaries, as I mentioned, low risk, non-critical communication, customer service, so linked with the organisation. But this is also, I would put people that are family or friends in the same category. Absolutely there for moral support, basic language support. You would want them there with your in your appointment or to explain a form that you need to fill in. But do you want someone that's not a professional working with you in a high-risk medical situation? And there is plenty of stories that NAATI hears of courts or hospitals where a child is asked to interpret without the language skills that that requires, or the ability to deal with the vicarious trauma that that requires. And the best way I could probably describe it is in a legal situation, the law in Australia is written in English, which is the dominant language in this country. But you would never accept someone just Googling the law and telling you how to interpret that. But we are more than happy in many situations for people to use their bilingual ability to do things that are equally as complex as interpreting the law from a professional lawyer or interpreting medical scenarios. Why would we take that risk? And I think if we've got nothing else to say, then, you know, in the medical example, absolutely you would ask a family or friend of, oh, I seem to have a pain in my arm. Have you taken Panadol? Is that okay? Or you'd go to a pharmacist and get a bit of general advice. Absolutely. But do you want the very high level stuff left to someone that isn't a professional in it? So if we go to the next slide, the professional interpreter, very much high risk, critical communication. These are professionals. They work on language. They keep up to date with modern terms. Informed decision-making, critical point there, legally binding decisions. You want to be able to, as an organisation, hand on heart say that consumer entered into this contract willingly without the influence of my worker who's attached to me, paid by me, making decisions by me, or potentially their job relies on sales targets. And very much that language ability. And this is not, you know, I'm speaking in generalizations. Clearly, there's going to be lots of bilingual workers that have very high levels of communication skills, but the ethics of the profession of interpreting mean a lot, but also keeping up to date with the language as it evolves. So lots of people that have learnt the language from their parents, for example, so they might be first generation Australians, and they've learnt a version of a language other than English that has been static. So might be appropriate for when the person migrated in the 60s, but it doesn't keep up to date with the modern variations of that language as it's spoken in the home country. We can probably chuck to the next slide. So we have a test. This is not a sales pitch. Our biggest thing is that bilingual workers exist in Australia. They absolutely should exist. The critical thing for us is that you know that the language that they're speaking is appropriate and that they know the boundaries of their role. If you've got a way to test that other than NAATI, absolutely go for it. The critical thing for us is that you understand it. When we've got a community language aid test. Our main clients at the moment are government departments that pay a community language aid allowance to their staff, and they want some way to verify that. If there is another way to do it, go for it. But the information I can give is we have about, I don't know, 70 to 80% pass rate depending on the language. And the main reasons that people don't pass in this test is use of too many loan words. So they'll use too many English words in their conversation, for example, or if you're in another area such as India, they'll use too many Hindi words if it's a Punjabi test, for example. So do you know what your bilingual workers are saying to your clients? And the second reason that people are unsuccessful in the test is over-explaining or inserting information that never existed. So doing a bit too much helping, maybe not conveying the information properly, and that leads to some problems in communication as well. So for us, the CLAR test is appropriate for anyone in that workplace. You can go to the next slide. It's okay. I'll finish up and go for panel soon. As long as you've got a way to test it. If you don't, we've got the test that can do it, and we've got a training video module that goes through boundaries and the ethics and when to pass off to a professional. But if you take nothing out of this from me today, is absolutely a role for bilingual workers, but they should know their boundaries and they should know when to pass through to a professional interpreter. Because just remember the lawyer example, the law is written in English, but you would never accept someone that is an English speaker interpreting that law in a critical case, and you shouldn't do that with other languages either.
Well, thank you, Michael. And having worked as a bilingual worker, facilitator, educator, I can tell you that sometimes my role was really misunderstood from time to time by organizations. So it's also about being able to explain and understand yourself what you're supposed to and what you're not supposed to do. And I think it's also fair to say that sometimes people are, the bilingual work is not in their position description, or people aren't getting paid for it. They're not, nobody's checked how well they speak a language. So when we talk about a bilingual worker, Michael, you have explained to us what it is according to NAATI, and I think it's also around managing of risk for yourself. If you are overstepping the mark, you can put yourself at risk, but also other people with the best of intentions sometimes when you're trying to assist, you might be exposing all kinds of parties, including yourself, to risk. So really, a bilingual worker is somebody that speaks two languages, I guess. That's the most basic definition. But for me, it's also somebody who has that title in the job description, and is trained, supported, and also gets paid for the work they do. So often we hear, horror stories of people that might be happen to speak Greek and work in a kitchen of an aged care facility that might be asked to translate a will, all kinds of things like that. So, I do believe that bilingual workers deliver essential services because it's not always that you need an interpreter, and it's not always that you can get an interpreter, but it's about that scope of the job and really understanding where your work starts and where it ends, and where you shouldn't sort of go at all. Who do we work with, or who do bilingual workers work with? All kinds of spaces, including local councils, aged care facilities, government services. But we know that sometimes people that are bilingual get asked to do translations, to do interpreting, all kinds of things. So I'll move on to our next question. Thanks, Angelo. Which is moving on. How did you become a bilingual worker? So we do have Marama, who we will ask a couple of questions of. So if I could get you to maybe turn your camera on and tell us, please, what are your language pairs? What's your second language? We assume that you speak English. And how did you become a bilingual worker? What happened? Was it just accidental, or how did it come about?
Thank you, Eva. Can you see my camera? I can see you, but I'm not sure if you see me.
Yeah, we can hear you and you can see. Yeah, that's good. Go for it.
Sorry, just I have a technical issues here. Yeah, I don't know where to start. I just from the beginning, when I fled my country because of the refugee, and then we were depend on each other, like supporting refugee camp, and then like language support, maybe some assistance with the new arrivals, and when they drop in the camp, and then so that's I developed a sense of supporting someone who is struggling in a challenge environment and in a very difficult situation. That's I developed that sense. When I arrived in Australia many years ago, like about 25 or something years ago, I couldn't find like Oromo interpreter for me. The language itself was very hard, and then I couldn't understand anything, and then that was a very challenge, that's experience. And then I said maybe I have to learn how to support others as well. Since then, that's I see myself as I'm not sure how to define, but like as a bicultural worker or maybe bilingual worker. I don't know, there's a lot of definitions nowadays, but I see myself when I work for work, and then I see as bicultural because I work in 2 different cultures, even sometimes 3 different cultures, professions, culture, and then association, organization culture, or my community culture or something. So that's the point. And then that was my start.
Okay. So really it was a little bit accidental, I guess, if I can put it that way, and just in response to the needs of the community. From what we heard, you arrived here as a refugee, and there were not many Oromo speakers at all, and therefore you were put on the spot and kind of, no training, sink or swim kind of a situation, right?
That's exactly right. I remember when I was just struggled once, tried to rent even house, and then I probably say no on the form. I didn't know what it is, and then the next day the agency called me, and then that means you don't want it. That means you don't. When the agency say, I'm a bit confused, and I say yes. And then after 2 weeks, and then where is my application? One of my committee leader came, and then what did you say? I think you know this. No, this should be yes. And then that was my experience. And it's a lot of experiences anyway. That's miscommunication, and then that's improved my language a lot. Really, still have to do a lot of improvement, but at that time was just can't understand anything. So that's about 25 years ago.
Okay. It sounds like it's work in progress. Silva, I might throw this to you, although you're not a bilingual worker yourself, but you work with bilingual workers, and at Enliven you have created quite an interesting and very supportive space for people that work as bilingual workers or facilitators. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the challenges perhaps that you've encountered and some of the successes? We need you to, yeah. Perfect.
Yes. Thank you, Eva. Yes, and there's been many, many highlights and there's been many achievements, and we are very, very lucky to work in that partnership, particularly with the councils, with their support, as well as the community agencies that have supported bilingual workers through recruitment and supported them in that way. I think some of the, in terms of the highlights, our experience has been that bicultural workers and community champions have been pivotal in providing that warm handover of services, connecting community to various services, particularly during COVID, and also co-designing resources and testing resources that would go out into the community. So they're the highlights that we've really had. In terms of some of the challenges, and this is what we continue to advocate for, is that formal continued recognition of bicultural and bilingual workers as a workforce in their own right. So that's been one of the challenges, having that consistent remuneration and the recognition has been another one. And that recognition that often they are multilingual, and I think that's what Marama touched on as well, so that they bring with them many different experiences through culture and language, but also many skill sets as well that they can bring along to the work. So I believe there's some of those challenges that we've met while working with this fabulous network, but that is something that we are continuing to advocate for. Yeah.
And of course, people that you work with make an enormous difference to the communities that they serve. And there is that pressure and that expectation that just because you are part of one particular community, you should perhaps be providing your services for free or at a reduced rate or on a volunteer basis. So that is a struggle, because to professionalize this profession, we need to act ethically and pay people for the work they do, right?
Absolutely, that's right. And I think that there's a piece in there around acknowledging, and also that education piece to the community as well, in terms of what a bicultural worker does and the boundaries around that as well. And I know Michael touched on that too. So I think that can be a great piece of work, to continue forward. With this advocacy. We do know bicultural workers, community champions, it's not a 9-to-5 job. They often live, of course, within the community that they are helping. So sometimes those boundaries are blurred.
That's a bit blurred, yeah, thank you. Michael, you're not a bilingual worker either, but anecdotally or otherwise, can you tell us how people actually become bilingual workers? So I'm assuming it's because they speak more than 2 languages, of course. But in your travels, what kind of trends are we seeing? How do people end up with NAATI's program? Is it mostly the government or, say, banks that require bilingual workers? So what happens on the ground?
Yeah, there's the formal one, the people that take our community language aid test. It is a few government agencies who are using it very specifically to meet clauses in their enterprise agreements.
Mm-hmm.
But the more broadly anecdotal stuff is, it's really people that are getting pushed into it because someone comes in that doesn't speak English well. They go, who can I grab? And then without any recognition or payment or boundaries, dragging that person in to become a de facto interpreter. And again, without those boundaries to go, actually, this has a very specific role and we should reward you for that. And it's funny, isn't it? You would never, keep going to a law or a medical thing, you would never expect someone to use their skills in a workplace without remuneration, but very much in this sort of human support thing. Like, we know that sort of nurses and the like are quite poorly remunerated for their work, aged care and the same. And I see migrant and refugee support very much in the same vein. Oh, you should just do it because it's a nice thing to do.
Yep.
But you're bringing such a level of skill that makes such a level of difference to someone's life. And, you know, what's the outcome of not having a bilingual support worker, either culturally or for the language assistance provided, could be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional cost, risk, litigation, you name it, actual ability to deliver the service, and it's not being recognised. So very much we're seeing anecdotally people are sort of falling into it, happen to be working for Centrelink or happen to be working for a settlement agency and just getting pushed into it because they work that, but certainly not seeing any of the remuneration that it deserves.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Michael. So we will move on to the next question, and I'll ask Marama to tell us what his typical day looks like. But I remember when I did this work for a number of different organizations, it felt very structured. So for Cancer Council Victoria, I've worked for, I think, about 5 years delivering cancer messages to the Polish community. And the reason I loved that job was that I was trained, supported. There was somebody at the end of the line that I could phone. And I had resources to take to the community. So it was a very structured program that no longer exists. But I think at the time, we were able to go out to the community and deliver health messages. Then it moved on to something else, like I've worked for Carers Victoria on research projects and all of those kinds of things. But I think remembering the successful relationships, I can tell you that when there was a lot of support behind the scenes, that worked the best. And I think sometimes what happens is that that's not the case. So Marama, I was going to ask you, what does a typical day for you look like when you work as a bilingual worker?
Maybe to mention few, I know it's very complicated and then very complex. And then when you say like typical of like a day, one is like self preparation, and then I prepare myself and then for the day. And especially when people are struggling with financial, especially new arrivals, I did a lot of like translations like for free. Like documents, few documents, and then for immigration purpose for something. That's one of my satisfaction. And then every day, like I get maybe 2-3 emails, and then can you help me please with this? Can you help me? Especially when they send with like photos and then like orphans and then all these and then stitching. That's another. And also make myself like always designating my mobiles and then from others, not to interrupt with other tasks, and then make allocation, and then my desk, and then my paper, and then pen always ready, 2-3 maybe quickly. So that's what I'm just expecting myself, and also like as much as possible, like to know more about these services, and then from experience, and then like how can just effectively like interpret or deliver the services. That's always preparation is on the day, and especially there is a time when they call me like later evening, and then ask me for support for the next day. Oh, that's also yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like every day is different, and it can be a little bit stressful from time to time, and there's an expectation that you're always available, including after hours. Am I right?
That's right, exactly. Yeah, and even early in the morning, and that's what.
Okay, so how do you cope with that? Like, how do you put those boundaries across around your role that Michael has mentioned? Like, what are your defense mechanisms?
Yeah, I see myself like in the mirror, and then what experience I came from, and then what the life experiences brought me here, and also how that person is struggling. I see that person in the same lens of myself, and then the experiences I came across, and also once they like once I get support, and then how they like appreciate you. It's not like money, and then they said, thank you very much, and then I achieved this, and then my problem is solved, and then now just I'm satisfied, and my stress is less, and then all this is appreciated when they see you in the community. So that's maybe part of the proud of the profession as well, and then like acceptance.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Marama. So we are getting quite a few comments and questions. So we'll have about 10 minutes for questions. But what would be some of the biggest challenges, Marama, for you when it comes to working as a bilingual worker or bicultural worker?
The challenge for me is the system established itself. Like if you take, I saw many times in an immigration system when I work like as interpreter, and a lawyer, and then when they do cross-checking and then investigating, and then when they ask. One click has example come to my mind now. One of the asylum seekers applied, and then she told the lawyer her background stories, and then what happened, and then what trauma she developed. Her like the army caught her father, and then around 9 o'clock took her back for a while, and then after 2 hours they brought a dead body, and then with blood on the face and then everything, and then they called the family, the mother from the inside, and then they told her, come and collect your husband, when she just ran out, and then she saw dead body on the floor. And then she said, that's my trauma. And then the lawyer said, why your mother didn't apply? Run to the police station, and then told the police station. That's a bit complicated because in many different countries, in developing countries, not like system in Australia. It's not like different settings because army, security, policies operating under the same umbrella, under the same guidance. That was the same experience I came across, and then what happened to my father. So that means I was very challenging, and then I was just totally just emotion, and then I tried to control myself. And then he said, "You are here. I just want to interpret it for me, to translate for me, please. Sorry, interpret it for me here." So that's I couldn't understand, and then what the situation looks like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of challenges, and then sometimes you come across, and then you have to just debriefing yourself, and then sometimes you have to take your own in what situation we are operating, like as a bicultural or bilingual workers. That's
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us, Marama. And Michael, you mentioned that the pass rate for the test that NAATI does is about 70%. So that means that 30% fail, and you've explained to us why. Would that be one of the bigger challenges of the system that you have? Or like what are some of the interesting challenges that you might be encountering at NAATI?
The biggest thing for us is probably, I'd put it down to expectations. So, and probably that goes a bit with what Marama has been saying. So boundary, and you touched on it before as well, Eva. So boundaries and expectations from employers and colleagues of the people that are doing the work, I think is one of them. And then just that knowledge when people come into the test, if we make it very specifically about NAATI and the testing and the pass rate, that expectation that you should maybe overhelp or over-deliver in, and that's really comes from those workplace pressures that are coming onto people. So they've been working as bilingual workers. They see the test as a way just to formalise that. But over the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years, who knows, they've actually been going outside of the script, for want of a better term, and then are bringing that into a test environment and not succeeding because of it. And I think the whole of Australia could do better at understanding what the roles and boundaries are, and then not placing expectations on people that are bilingual that are unrealistic, or putting them in harm's way or at risk of vicarious trauma and the like, which we heard a couple of examples of just then as well.
Yeah, and I think what I observed is that, again, you know, lots of people have very good intentions, but sometimes they don't have insight into how well or how poorly they speak a language, or you know, ability to speak a language is a little bit different than being able to be bilingual in a professional context. So I guess, some people might get a bit, disheartened by, having worked in this space all their lives, and all of a sudden, they don't succeed through NAATI. Silva, over to you now. Just a quick question regarding some of the challenges that you might encounter as an organization. From memory, you have about 80 people that you work with and you support and you look after. Can I use that term? What happens at your end? What are some of the more difficult things that happened at Enliven?
Yes, thank you, Eva. Thank you so much. And in terms of, just to clarify as well, so the network consists of approximately 82 bicultural workers and community champions. And during that funding period, they were funded through various agencies in the southeast. So the councils provided funding to various organisations to then employ bicultural workers, and we really provided that network support in terms of capacity building, etc. I think in terms of the challenges, I think the pressures that Marama has spoken about, sometimes they were also passed on to the project team members as well. And again, it's those boundaries where you might have that knock-on effect. So, of course, we as a project team would like to help the network members, and we have done, which really just, so that was one of the challenges in terms of sort of the resourcing, the additional resourcing required to support the network. And there were a couple of challenges again with communities asking bicultural workers and community champions for, in aspects out of their scope. So things like medical, translation of medical information, for example, particularly as we were working in that COVID environment. So that was one of the other challenges as well, in terms of really explaining the barriers there, and also the limitations of bicultural workers and community champions in that space. We did help to support, of course. We had capacity building sessions, particularly through Monash Health South East Public Health Unit, who came in and talked a lot about COVID and provided that support. So we did support as much as possible, but yeah, very, very aware of those, some of those challenges around the scope of bicultural workers and community champions.
Because I guess that would also vary outside of the basic principles across different organizations as to what the expectations might be or what the duties might be. But I say to everyone, if it's not in your position description, it's not your job. Like, I know it's a bit tough, but because it is about managing of that risk and your skill set, if any, to be able to step out of your comfort zone. Thank you, Silva. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. So I'll hand over to Angela, and thank you, Michael. Thank you, Silva. Thank you, Marama, for your contribution here. We'll probably have a minute or two for a few questions. Go for it, Angela.
Yeah, so this is a bit on a lighter note, but what do you enjoy best about being a bicultural worker? And I'll ask this to Marama.
I think it's a rewarding because it's always learning. When you got like interpreting for physio, let's say, even you learn something for yourself, and then how they just get out of chair, or how they treat the injury or something, and then you learn something for yourself. I learned it a lot when I just interpreting family violence areas, what the rule says, what the risk is, and then what does it mean, and then for myself as well, and then like learning, and also always like updating with the system, what changes, and then when they talk on the immigration system and sponsoring system and something, and all this is just learning. So always learning, I see myself, updating myself, and also like training itself. So this is some rewarding. That's I can say it's rewarding.
Marama, a quick question from me. So because you also work as an interpreter, right? Am I right? And a translator, or just?
Yes, both. I'm interpreting and then translating. And then now on top of that, the bicultural worker as a community development.
Right. So is it difficult to switch between the different modes? Like, do you sometimes have to remind yourself, hold on a second, that's not my job. I'm here as a bicultural worker, not an interpreter?
It's not easy to avoid. It's not
Right.
It's not easy to avoid, yeah. Because the demand, it's not only about the income or getting some money or something, but it's about supporting, and then it's about satisfaction, and then the value you have in a community as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Angela.
Yeah, no, okay, so the next question we'll go to, so speaking about pay, how should you go about asking for remuneration for doing the work that is something they have been doing for a while for free? Does anyone want to take this one?
Oh, I might, and then I think Silva's keen to say something. Look,
yeah.
I think we all need to learn to say no when appropriate, which is pretty hard because you have your community that you want to help, you have the pressure of maybe organization that wants you to step in. But I think it's really important to remember what your role is and what you're capable of and where the risks are. And if you have been, let's say if you carry NAATI certification in this space, then obviously you've invested into professional development, into sitting to the test, into educating yourself and improving your skills. So I think as much as you can, let's say no to unpaid tasks, and asking for money might not be easy, but I think, you know, we all need to work towards it. Silva, what do you think? Would you add to that?
I completely agree, Eva, and I think you really said it very, very well. And I think one of the things is that when we are saying no, to also reflect and explain how much effort the bicultural worker or community champion goes to make sure that they are up to date with all the information. So as Marama said, there's a lot of, you know, there's a continuous learning, and that's what we offer through our network as well. So really to say, well, actually, this is all the things that I do to be able to then go out and help my community. And this is why I'm saying no in this instance, because I feel that, you know, respecting my time and what I do is, you know, is really important to me as well. And I think that could be really good role modeling as well for the community to make sure that, you know, they are getting the satisfaction not only from helping community, but also monetary as well, which is very important. One of the, if I could just very quickly, one of the initiatives that we put in place as well is provide certificates to bicultural workers and community champions that they could show to their community to say, well, I'm part of this network. These are the meetings that I attend. This is the training that I undertake as a community champion, just for that sort of education piece.
And I like the term community champion because that encompasses really what the role is, where you know, that, you know, kind of all the skills and everything you bring in is, you know, championing for the community, but also for yourself that you're part of. Michael, did you want to add anything else about remuneration and asking to be paid?
Yeah, I would look, and I know that it's not easy to necessarily negotiate, but I would comment that if you've got an enterprise agreement in your workplace, they usually have a set time limit. Try and get yourself onto the staff consultative committee and try and put community language allowance or something similar into it. And I would compare it to workplace health and safety representatives and first aid trained people or fire wardens. In many enterprise agreements, all of those skills come with a $10 or $20 a week allowance because they're bringing something additional to their job role into the workplace. The more we can push language up as a skill that contributes to your general day-to-day job, the better. And if you can bake that into an enterprise agreement, then it's not a negotiation between you and your employer, it's a negotiation between the entire workforce and the employer. And that's going to be a much more effective and sustainable way to allow it.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I guess just to summarize, and we are running out of time, but I would say that the value of bilingualism and the skills that people bring into the community, to the service providers, should really be elevated and amplified. I think Australia, such an amazing hub of languages. We speak 300 different languages and we understand lots of cultures and, you know, all the dynamics and all the things that Marama talked about as far as, you know, the context of our conversations. that hopefully we can all work towards it, where rather than an impediment, being bilingual is seen as something to put on your CV, to amplify, to be paid for. And on that note, we're going to have to finish, other than hand over to Angela just for the two last, a couple of messages from Polaron, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Eva. Yeah, so if you do have any bilingual worker inquiries, please contact our Head of Community Engagement, Carla, at carla.f@polaron.com.au. Otherwise, for NAATI related inquiries, please contact NAATI via info@naati.com.au. Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insights into this field. A big thanks to Enliven Victoria. Silva, thank you so much for connecting us to Marama, and also for participating as well. Eva, always a pleasure. I'd also like to just pass it over to Carla now, just quickly to introduce you to Vic Forum. And feel free to go to the next slide. And yes, please, Carla, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Angelo. Thank you, everyone, all the panelists and everyone that is joining us. It's been a pleasure to learn more about bilingual workers and their challenges, as well as what are the benefits. But I would like to invite you all, everyone, to our diversity forum next month. Worst at Work is going to be a very practical forum where you're going to learn a lot about multicultural communication, engagement, and you can boost your engagement skills. We're going to talk about trends, tips, tools. And so we have it on March 21st at 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. So you are all invited to our diversity forums. We have NAATI as a sponsor, as well as a partner, Enliven, here with us as well, and other partners. And this is going to be held at the Victorian Pride Center. You can register. We have shared it to our newsletters and as well on our social media channels, as well as LinkedIn. You can register to the link. If not, you can always send me a mail, a message, and I can send you through the link to register to the forum.
All right, thank you all. Have a lovely rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone.